But I think about like the great startups we've had in the last 5 years, or startups, like whether it's an Uber or Facebook or whatever, but those were all humans in situations where they had to put their life on the line, they had to go raise capital, they had to convince people and try. What if there was an autonomous network that was just constantly testing, experimenting, and when the capital was there, it would just go in and imagine the inefficiencies it would solve. And like, it could be on one hand scary, but on one hand just a $1 billion corporation just popped up in the last 4 months. No human ever would have thought about it, but some AI piece that was locked into a crypto thing just did it, and now it did this massive, it improved something, maybe in healthcare, maybe in charity, or maybe in this, and now it's just there.
Well, even the example you just gave, and I'm just going to diss a $1 billion company that just went on IPO, but Uber, what exactly does Uber do other than take 20%? They use...
It's peer to corporate.
They write software, okay. But so the reason I trust the driver is not because they've been vetted by Uber, but because I look at the reputation score they have from other riders, right? And you can do vetting, you can outsource the vetting part. That's not hard. You could outsource that to another company and only accept users who have been vetted. For that very, there is room for some vetting when you have the opportunity for people to come into contact in that way that can be dangerous. And they act as an intermediary for the payment, which ensures that the driver will be paid and that I won't pay more than I agree to. Great, we can do that with an escrow contract. We don't need any company to do that as an intermediary, and certainly not at a cost of 20%. They match riders to drivers. Well, they do that, but they only do it if the driver is running that application, and they do that in competition with 5 other companies. As a result, they fragmented the market. So there's not enough drivers or riders to compete with them, and they create monopolies that are completely unnecessary. They write great software. Like, well, honestly, we could do that open source at this point. The idea was great, but the execution has created this hierarchy where does most of the money go? Most of the money goes into debt servicing on low interest, highly leveraged debts that they've been getting in order to expand their monopoly status. And I'm not just picking on Uber. I pick on any of these billion-dollar unicorn technology companies and give me a good reason why they can't be replaced by a collaborative application that connects peer-to-peer without all of the intermediaries that cost a lot of money. And so this is also and people hear that like, ooh, that sounds a bit communist, right? Actually, the exact opposite. We're talking about increasing efficiency by reducing waste and shortening the distance from production to consumption, or from supply to demand, right? Ultimately, the work's being done by a driver, and the value's being provided by a customer. And that applies to Airbnb, it applies to a ton of other things. At some point you realize that there's no need for a company. Now, in the internet era, we already realized that in terms of there's no need for a phone company if you can have a phone app. And that's why Skype is free, or any of these other messaging and video conferencing things are free, is because there's no need for a company to take a percentage or value just to transmit communications. We're going to see that happening. This is going to drive the second big wave of disintermediation on the internet, which ironically is going to disintermediate many of the first wave unicorn billion-dollar companies, because you don't need them anymore.
Interesting.
It's going to take a while, because at the moment there aren't enough customers who have cryptocurrency, access to it. The software and the infrastructure isn't ready for all of that. But the ideas are already stewing. And so the sharing economy is actually much more interesting if you envision it as a peer-to-peer sharing economy based on commonly agreed, decentralized, autonomously operating structures that provide trust, reputation, and control the interaction so you can't cheat each other, but otherwise don't make any money of this. Or if they do make a bit of money, it's in order to fund more software development. They do it in a completely decentralized manner.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, think about that market capitalization of 80 or $100 billion. just being distributed back to the network, and then it being replaced by this peer-to-peer.
The drivers get paid
Yeah,
more, the customers pay less, and you have one less unicorn company, but who cares? Goldman Sachs will lose an important destination for their debt products.
Now, the only thing that Uber needed to get started, though, was a massive capital investment, which took belief by other humans to get it started.
Right.
And that's something that would be hard to be done by an autonomous network.
If only we had some kind of crowdfunding mechanism that opened to a giant global pool of investors who otherwise didn't have good investment opportunities, and they could simultaneously improve the future of their children by taking a bit more risk. And that's why ICOs are not just a scam.
Right.
They are now, almost entirely, but they are also the future of crowdfunding.
Right, and imagine...
Because we disintermediate a lot of the... It's really ironic because this space got flooded by venture capitalists in 2014, and what got born out of it actually disrupted venture capital first before any other industry.
Yeah, it's crazy because the ICO is quite beautiful in the way it's laid out.
Yeah.
It just wasn't used to the great means, and it also kind of, you're right, kind of made those initial venture investments, well, it takes them out of the loop, doesn't it? You don't need them anymore.
You don't. And also you bridge this enormous gap that exists between the early stage organic funding, where you have a founder who's basically using a credit card or their savings or friends and family to invest in a tiny startup. And then you've got this gap. There's a bit of angel investment in between, but that's mostly prevalent in the US. And then you have to get pretty successful before you can go for VC. And by that point, the pipeline gets really narrow. So only a few companies make it that far. And then from there to get to a public offering. Mm-hmm. What if you can bridge that gap? Now, of course, there will be a lot of scams. And a lot of these companies don't deserve to raise money. But here's the interesting thing. This round of investors now are not so fast to invest in ICOs. The ones who got burned the previous round, they learned a very important lesson, right? And when you look at the history of investors in the United States versus developing countries, like you look at investors, let's say in India, right? The difference isn't better vetting. The difference is 100+ years of experience that has been passed down 3 generations or 4 generations. The reason American investors are harder to cheat with stupid investment schemes is because they've internalized a lot of the looks too good to be true, 10% compound a month return on investment is probably a Ponzi scheme. And so they see these things and are immune to the obvious scams. There's a danger here because the scammers generally go for the least educated, the least informed, and usually also seniors who are in a more vulnerable age or even have cognitive issues and don't remember what happened recently. But the way we build better investments and more security into the system is not by introducing the 19th or 20th century regulatory framework of institutional regulators. It's by building a decentralized vetting and regulatory organization. You could actually build within the programmable systems themselves better mechanisms for trust. Like, for example, putting the investments in escrow, where the people who are involved in founding the company or who are running things get a small percentage of the money. The rest of it sits in a pool controlled by the shareholders. They dole it out as needed based on repeated pitches and not just one, take it all, run. Right. Where you have the owners and directors sharing control over what we call a multi-signature wallet, where it takes 3 out of the 5 people to sign, so the CEO can't just dive into the bank account and head to Aruba. Where you have reputation scoring and distributed research, like a distributed organization that pays people to do due diligence on investment. And the people who are best at due diligence based on their history get rewarded more by the very shareholders who want to invest in these things. we can build mechanisms for the 21st century to solve the problems of the technology that we built in the 21st century. We don't have to go back and say, it'd all be better if it was run by a king.